Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. For me, and I imagine many of you listening to this show right now, I felt as though I didn't fit into the world around me for a long time. Looking back in hindsight, it wasn't that I objectively did not fit in, but rather it was the feeling of not wanting to fit into a broken system that led to me feeling flawed for so much of my young life. When we're young, we lack the life experience and self-awareness to accept ourselves for who we truly are, and in many cases, instead, look to the world around us to determine who we feel we should be. And I truly feel this is one of the challenges that we all go through in one way or another as we grow older and choose to individuate into the fullest expression of our authentic selves. Stopping by to share his experiences in the world of psychedelics with us today is a man who knows this aforementioned challenge all too well. From a very young age, he was diagnosed with a brain atrophy, which led to 30% of his brain not working properly, and a subsequent diagnosis of autism. The result of this was that doctors told his parents that he should be sent away to a specialized home, and essentially forgotten about and deemed unfit for society. However, his mother never gave up on him. She worked tirelessly with him to allow him to integrate into society, and because of that, he was able to not only move through life successfully, have meaningful relationships, and be a productive member of society, but he was also able to get himself to a point through therapy where he is no longer considered to have autism. And with the help of psychedelics, he was able to further remediate his brain and experience of life into one that is not only great and grand, but is also fulfilling. And in today's episode, we will be diving into his experiences with these medicines, his experiences using psychedelics to foster deeper connection in his life, and much, much more. So please, help me in welcoming my man, Noah Vilgrain, to the show. Noah, my man, what is up?
Super, super amazing to be here. And thank you very much for having me.
You're so welcome, man. For everyone listening, I recently was on Noah's podcast with him and his buddies that do the Mama's Boys podcast, and that was a friggin' blast. And then you reached out to me after, and you were like, hey, man, I got quite the story I'd like to tell on your show. And as soon as we connected, I knew immediately I would have you on the show regardless. But when I heard your story, I was extremely interested to get you on because, you know, these are realms I have not gotten into on this show yet, right? Like things like autism and psychedelics and, you know, brain atrophies and disorders and things like that. And so I was really excited to simply come on and dialogue with you about, you know, your experience and what you found using psychedelics in the way that I mentioned in the intro. And so, you know, I know that I went over quite a bit of your intro in the intro, but, you know, I'd love to hear in your own words a little bit about what I talked about in there, right? Like growing up with this brain atrophy, kind of the feelings you went through as a young child, like, you know, maybe hearing, I'm sure the doctors didn't tell you to your face, but you might have heard them saying these things to your mother, to your parents. You know, what was that like going through that? We'll start there before we get into the psychedelic aspect of this.
Well, it was a lot. It was a lot. It was always an uphill battle for me throughout my entire life. I was in almost the lower to middle end of the autistic spectrum where I started at. And there was a lot of uncertainty in my early childhood. So basically in France, there's not a lot of care put into the treatment of autism. I was really lucky because my family was quite well off. So I was sent to private schools where they did have programs for individual learning, for lessons that autistic people could have, I guess, more one-on-one with teachers. But it was still a school that was meant for, I guess, neurotypical kids. And I was always separated from everybody else. And when I would go to the classes with other neurotypical kids, I would get teased a lot, bullied a lot, made fun of a lot. And I always had to play this game of catch up with everybody else, both in an educational sense, but also more importantly, a social sense. And I was always told throughout my whole life, you're different. You're like nobody else. And that made me feel like I couldn't connect with anybody. And it made me feel like, oh, I'm weird and I'm different and I'm not a part of this world. I'm not a part of this society. And it was just a lot of work all of the time. And the moment that my educators and my mom knew that my brain could recover itself, because as I said, there was a lot of uncertainty. So there was a very specific path for me to take. And all the doctors would tell my mom, you should just send him away. You should just send him to a home. He's not going to talk very well. He's not going to connect with people very well. And you might as well just forget about him, is what they told my mom. And essentially one day, the incident that sort of introduced the idea that I could improve was I went to a circus one day when I was 5 years old, and there was some clowns that came onto the show, and they would do this act where they would bring kids on to show them what they wanted them to do, and each kid would fail, and then one clown obviously picked me in the crowd. And all of my teachers, and my mom was there too, because she would come to all the field trips. I couldn't be left alone. I was a problem child. I didn't know how to behave socially at all. There was no, and that was a large thing for my whole life, was that I just looked at social situations and didn't get any clues. It's quite, I have a lot of funny stories, but I'll just stick to this one where everyone's freaking out. And my mom went, all right, well, let's just see where this goes. I don't want him to feel like he can't do this. My mom's an amazing woman. She believed in me through all of it. But anyway. And so the clown showed me what they wanted me to do. And I was the only kid that did it perfect beat by beat. And it made the teachers cry. Everybody clapped. And everyone realized, oh shit, he learns visually. And so through a new teaching method and through new therapies, I had 6 different therapists for 17 years. Social therapists, speech therapists, psychiatrists, movement therapists, just so many different people that would teach me. And I would learn by visual stimuli. So that's how I learned, and that's how I got better. And when I went to do an MRI scan when I was 16, it revealed that my brain had recovered the 30% that was gone or that was damaged. But that's
amazing.
Yeah. Well, the power of the brain is an incredible thing. And the thing about my case is that it was literally a 50-50. There was no guarantee that it would have ended up like that. There are some people with my case who have only 5% of their brains damaged, and they need to be taken care of for the rest of their life. There's one girl I knew who had 50% completely damaged, and she became an honor student. So it's literally a flip of a coin when people with brain atrophies go through this.
That's so wild, man. And, it's interesting because, as human beings, we are connection thriving machines. We want to connect with those around us. And speaking spiritually, we are all reflections of one another, right? So our ability to relate and connect with one another allows us to actually feel like we have a place in the world. And so I can imagine how challenging that was, growing up and not exactly knowing, social cues and how to fit in and things like that. But, for you, I'm curious, and then we'll dive into the psychedelics, but I'm just really curious about this. When everyone clapped and the teachers cried and everything, what was the feeling you went through in that moment? Was there an immediate, I did it right? Or was it kind of hey, what's everyone clapping for? Or was it why couldn't anyone else do this? Or was it something different? What was the top feeling or thought you were having in that moment?
It was so long ago, but I actually do remember the feeling, and it was just being excited. And I was just excited that I could make people happy, because that was not, it was just not something that I made people feel all the time. I don't blame myself for it, but I had caused a lot of disturbances for a lot of people because it's not in the norm for a lot of people. So when people were clapping and cheering for me, it was like, oh shit, finally, I guess I am good for something at the very least. And to me, it was a crazy thought to have as a 5-year-old. It was an absolute maddening thought to have as a 5-year-old now that I look back. Because, like, a kid is supposed to have a childhood, is supposed to have fun. And it was just, I was always so focused on, like, what am I doing wrong? And there was just so much turmoil for a really, really, really long time. And when I got to finally understand social cues and understand some of the actions that I've had that I've regretted, it just threw me in a really deep depression for a really, 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 really long time.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. And I'm glad you bring up depression because, that's one of the things that I understand psychedelics can help with, right? I've had my own experience with that. And I'm curious for you, so at 16, you discover through an MRI that your brain is made of recovery, which I imagine for you was like another huge high / maybe a slippery slope as well of like, oh my goodness, like, what does this mean now? Am I going to be expected? Yada, 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 any of that. But I'm curious for you, like, when did psychedelics, including cannabis, come into the picture for you? And what was the experience like? Did you seek them out for anything? Did they kind of happen upon you with like friend circles? How did you first become introduced to the idea of psychedelics? And then we can get into the further question of like, at what point did you discover they could help you further with your development?
I was always friends with outcasts. With what friends I did have, I was always friends with like people who either didn't do well in school or, in France, there was people who were outcasts were always part of the hip hop scene. So I would hang out with friends who were playing basketball and listening to hip hop music, and I was with them. And this was in high school where basically this was after the MRI stuff. I was still diagnosed with Asperger's because I had lived so long with this different way of thinking where I wasn't totally socially adept, essentially. Let's say it like that. And at one point, when I was 16, it was me and my best friend at the time. He was like, "Oh, I got this thing, and we just like to chill and hang out at the park at midnight, but we can't tell our parents, we can't tell anybody else because we'll be called another word." And I was like, "What was that?" Stoners. I was like, "Oh, okay."
Those are the friends I want to hang out with.
They were really cool with it, and they were like, "We think you're pretty cool. We think you're fucking weird, and we'd like to see what would happen with you if you took marijuana." And so I was like, "Oh, marijuana. Yeah, my parents have always told me never to touch the stuff." And that's the thing. My parents have always told me never take drugs, never take psychedelics, never smoke weed. Like you can't do this stuff because we don't know what's going to happen with your brain. It was always very overprotectiveness. Never change your brain chemistry. It was always that. So me feeling just the little tinge of rebelliousness, I thought, I'm going to smoke some fucking weed. I'm going to cannabis. And it was pretty terrifying the first time. Not in the way that like I felt paranoia. It was just so different than what I was used to. And I felt so much anxiety and so much fear in my life that when I smoked cannabis for the first time and I didn't feel any of that, where that sort of just went away, that was super frightening for me because it was like, oh shit, did I get rid of my emotions? Like, it was just, I was calm and I like clutched onto my best friend. I'm like, what's happening to me? Like I grabbed him to something and I don't know what it is. And he's like, dude, you're just chill. And he was right. I was just calm for the first time in my life. And I was like, this feeling is amazing. And I smoked every day from that point for 9 years. And I've had a really big up and down relationship with marijuana after that. But my first time with psychedelics was always in a either party setting or, ooh, let's get fucked up setting, which always felt like, because there's not so much information about psychedelics and marijuana, that's usually the context that people get introduced to psychedelics to. And the first time I had done psychedelics, it was mushrooms. And it was in this, it's the weirdest story. It was basically this hippie party in the south of France, in the middle of the woods, in this old man farmer's property that we weren't allowed to be in. And these hippie guys had created this this almost like wooden structure where they were selling weed, pot brownies, space crepes, because, you know, we're French and we like to add a little something to pastries.
Space crepes. Oh my God, man. I didn't even know this existed, but now I have a new mission in life.
Oh my gosh, dude. It's so amazing. It was, they're very thin. It's like thin pancakes, but they had this like sugary marijuana taste to them that was just utterly delicious. I was so blown away. It's like, yes, this is how it should be. And so I was going through this party and I smoked, I shit you not, 17 joints. I ate 3 space crepes and then I ate like 7 pot brownies. It was ridiculous. It was like drunk with weed, basically.
Yeah.
It was a crazy time, and I was young, and I was like, I just want to get utterly blasted. And then I took 2 grams of mushrooms. And I didn't take anything away from the experience because I think that I was just so overloaded with marijuana that it just clashed with each other. But then I tried it again, and I realized the power of it. It made me, not only relieved me of my anxiety and of my fear of social situations, it made me feel like I belonged, like I was a part of the world finally, that, oh, I'm connected to the earth and there's no separation between me and the world, and there's no separation between me and society. I actually do have a purpose here. And that was sort of the beginning of my exploration. And it was mainly through mushrooms because I always feel this sense of nervousness trying a new psychedelic. And I understood very quickly the spiritual power of these things as well. And whenever I'm confronted with a new psychedelic or a new substance, I would prefer using it in a very respectful and almost ceremonial way. And I haven't been in a situation where, for example, acid was introduced to me several times, but I've never been comfortable enough to take it because it was always in a setting where, these people just want to get fucked up, and I'm not looking for that anymore. I realized that it doesn't benefit me and my purpose, essentially.
What is up, everybody? I hope you are all enjoying the show. and I wanted to stop by real quick and share a little bit about our latest podcast sponsor, Freedom Builders. Now, Freedom Builders are a team of graphic designers, website creators, videographers, social media marketing experts, and coaches that build out your custom online business from A to Z. This is a done-for-you service, which means they do the work for you while you get to put your focus back on what you love most, which is coaching your clients and bringing in sales. Now, as a former online fitness coach, Mike knows where your struggle points are and exactly how to help you overcome them. This is why he created Freedom Builders, so that you can scale your business while protecting your time and your energy. Now, you guys know that delegation is a business superpower, and you can activate this superpower today by scheduling a complimentary call with Mike at freedombuilders.com so you can start building the freedom that allows you to take your business to the next level. Alex and I recently connected with Freedom Builders for our Connect with Cannabis build-out, and we could not have been happier with the results. With Mike and his team, they were able to go through an outline and create a personalized program for our experience, develop our brand identity, build and design a custom branded web page, professionally edit our program video content, custom design all of our slide presentations, automate our email marketing sequences, create a seamless payment system for our offer, design unique infographics for our social media content, and guide us through our proven launch blueprint to generate organic leads through our social media. So if you're a coach, facilitator, or healer listening to this ad right now, and you are looking to put freedom back into your life, once again, go to freedombuilders.com and book your complimentary call today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the show, and I'm wishing you the best day ever. This is a story that I know very well in my own life too, where, even with cannabis at a young age, my friends were using it in a party way, and nothing against them. We're 16, right? I mean, you don't really know anything about ceremonial use or anything like that. But I knew for me, there was something different because they would use it at the end of the night and they'd already be drunk and things like that. And for me, alcohol just never really worked that well. I would look around and all my friends seemed like they were having a lot of fun. Maybe they were faking it, I don't know. But, I would just be like, I feel sick. And so for me, there was one night where, I had already tried cannabis a couple of times, and I've told this story, in multiple podcasts about my first time feeling the lack of anxiety. But the first time I tried it in a party type atmosphere, I realized, oh my goodness, this actually allows me to feel more connected to the people around me, and it allows me to feel more connected to myself. And what I really found was that when I interacted with cannabis, of course, I didn't know about ceremony or anything like that when I was 16, 17. But what I did know was my passions, which were playing guitar, which were watching movies, which was really taking myself out on a date. And so for me, when I would interact with cannabis, it would be an opportunity for me to kind of tell everyone oh guys, sorry, I got too high, I got to go inside. And then I would just play guitar and watch Star Wars, and they'd be like, oh, Ryan always gets really baked off 2 hits. Right. And so it was fun for me because, yes, I did have a very low tolerance for cannabis, and I still do to this day. But, I found that even at a very young age, I started recognizing the idea that I realized most people are looking for the effect from this. And I am looking for what the effect brings forth. For them, the effect was almost the goal. It was interact with medicine, feel the effect. That was their goal. For me, it was interact with the medicine. The effect comes on. What does the effect bring forth? Yeah. So deeper connection to myself, more connection to music, a different creative side of myself that, could allow me to watch Star Wars in a totally different way and have some really profound revelations, or these kind of things. So I realized at an early age, I didn't know how to articulate that at that age. And I can look back in hindsight and say that's what was happening now. But it's really interesting because, I find a lot of the people that, get into trouble with psychedelics is because they're treating it like alcohol. And what I mean by that is more must equal better. And it makes, a little bit of sense because for a lot of us, especially at young ages, we are a little nervous, we are a little anxious. And so alcohol allows us to lose some inhibitions. And as a result, sometimes we do feel calmer. Sometimes we do feel more able to say things. The only thing is that usually the things we're saying are not exactly in alignment with our true purpose, to put it that way, right? They're not exactly in alignment with our soul, our heart, etc. Whereas with psychedelics, when we interact with them in a ceremonial way, or we happen to just get it right by chance when we're in a party atmosphere or something like that, because like I said, for myself, there was a lot of trial and error with psychedelics when I first started, getting into them. And by psychedelics, I mean specifically cannabis, and then mushrooms came later on. But what I realized was that, when I was interacting with cannabis, I would feel more comfortable to talk, but what I was saying, I was very aware of. It wasn't like I was going to say something that I would regret the next day. If anything, I would say something that like, I might be like, oh my goodness, was that too vulnerable? But it wasn't something crude or like anything like that can happen with alcohol. Sure. And so I think that's one of the big challenges people run into is they just treat psychedelics like alcohol because that's what they were used to and the first thing they were introduced to. And so it sounds as though you were in a very similar situation where we were like, hey, if a little cannabis is great, a lot of it's got to be better. And you know what? Maybe I can add mushrooms right on the top of it and that'll be even better. And, luckily for you, you realized like, okay, that's not actually the way that I'm going to get the best use of these medicines and be able to commune with them in the best and most, aligned way. And I think that, it's really interesting to dive into these stories because, as I look into my own psychedelic journey, the first time I did mushrooms, Pandora's box was opened. I mean, it was tickled for sure with cannabis. And, I find that for me, once Pandora's box was opened with mushrooms, and then I tried LSD for the first time, and that was just pure shenanigans. LSD for me is pure laughter medicine. And it's really like, if I could describe it in 3 words, it'd be Control Alt Delete. It's just like, have you ever wanted to, feel as though you didn't know your own way home on a way that you've taken 100 times? Take LSD and you'll just Control Alt Delete yourself and be in an area or a situation where you're like, I don't even know if this is really a tree. I don't know if this is my street, someone else's street. So it's fun if you're in a safe container, right? But what I found with LSD is that's how I found it. But when I actually started tapping into it, I was like, wow, there is something very profound here. And I realized that when I accidentally took between 50 and 70 hits of LSD, I don't exactly know how much because it was liquid. And I didn't know what I was doing at a very young age, not very young, but early 20s. And, but it was a great experience though, because I was forced to surrender. I then realized, this is what surrendering is. Ooh, this is what real relaxation is. Like when you can stare at the stars for 8 hours, we did it at night, and not have a thought go through you and just be so present, staring at the stars, not be in your phone, not be thinking about what's happening next, just be so focused on anything, let alone the stars. That to me was like, oh, this is relaxing. And so it was like in these experiences that I was able to actually take, give context to these things I had heard about before. Simple things like relaxation, happiness, euphoria, terror, anxiety, whatever. Like it was able to experience them fully without judgment. And I think that for a lot of people, that's like one of the biggest medicines that psychedelics have to offer is this ability to have direct experience, because I think that, in an age where our intellect has been going to the gym since we were 6 years old, we all go to school, we all learn a lot of things and end up quote unquote knowing a lot of things. We don't actually have the direct experience. And the analogy I give for this is like, you can read about what a hamburger is like, right? You can read about what it tastes like, the texture of it, the different constituents or condiments you can put on it. But eventually, if you want to know what a hamburger is, you're just going to have to try it yourself, And I think that like this is one of the things that society is missing out on right now more than ever is this actual direct experience. It's like, no, we know all this stuff. It's like, yeah, but if you actually tried it yet? And I'm not saying psychedelics are for everyone or hamburgers are for everyone. But what I am saying is that whatever it is that you're fascinated with, you got to go out and actually try it eventually. It's good to give a little bit of context and have some intellect around it. But if you don't go out and try it, you're kind of missing the point.
Absolutely.
One of the things I'm curious on for you is, at what point in your psychedelic, I don't want to call it career, but your psychedelic practice, I will say, career is a funny term to put there, but in what point in your psychedelic practice did you notice, like an almost another level being opened up, right? You mentioned with mushrooms, this feeling, right? Of like, oh, wow, I'm able to fit in, I'm able to be connected to the earth. But, when was the first time that you truly felt like you were able to integrate that, I guess I'll say, in a way that was able to lead over into your sober state of reality?
I think it was my second mushroom trip where the set and setting I had instilled into it made all the difference. I didn't just eat them. I made them into a tea. I went out into nature, into a spot I trusted. I was with my girlfriend, and that experience made me feel like I was a part of the earth. It was the one I was talking about where properly I started to feel a part of the world, and also understand that I am a much more multifaceted being than I had given myself credit for or human beings for. Because if we're able to have these chemicals in our brains that produce these extremely elaborate dimensions for us to explore with, then there's a lot more going on with us than what we know of in our waking day-to-day life. And this is a little funny side note, but when I smoke marijuana, actually, I have instant closed eye visuals and hallucinations. I'm somebody who is very, very sensitive to substances. So whenever I smoked marijuana, it just created this very, very intense, almost psychedelic journey whenever I close my eyes. So I find their beauty in closing my eyes and just experiencing whatever my psyche wants to experience with this substance and with the spirit as well, because I do believe in the spiritual aspect of it and what it wants for me and my higher purpose. But after that experience, I wasn't afraid to communicate with anybody anymore. And I wasn't afraid to go out exploring, because the thing about my autism through most of my life was that it was harder for me than other people to go out of my comfort zone. And I was very rigid in my way of thought. So if I believed that there was a truth, that was it. There was no open-mindedness about it. It was very black and white. It's either you believe in it or you're a fucking idiot, and I don't. It was very much like that. It was super black and white. So, for example, I have a French and American family, and I would go to America a lot because my grandmother had MS, and we would visit her often because we never knew when she was going to pass away, and we wanted to connect with her. It was very important for my mother that we connected with my grandmother. And my grandfather, who comes from the Midwest in Nebraska, very religious, very pro-American, would teach me things where it's like, America's number one, God is number one, you are a Christian boy, that's the end of it. So I would be interacting with people going, America is number one, and if you don't believe it, fuck you. It was so black and white. And then when I had my first cannabis experience and when I did psychedelics, I realized, oh, no, there is no number one. Everything is just a subjective experience to everybody. And there's a lot of places that I can get a lot of positivity from, a lot of positive lessons. And I can learn from different people around the world. And I can be open to talking to other people. So after that second experience, it really opened my mind and consciousness to the idea of, I want to connect with people more, and I want to hear about their reality and what they think and what their experiences are like. I want to be a lot more open to the world. And it really cemented into the idea of openness. And I began that. I began to talk to people a lot more. I began to listen a lot more. And it was the first time that I ever actually understood integration before I knew what integration was. And it was one of these things where I was like, okay, I did it in a great set and setting with somebody that I loved. And I came in with intention of just, I want to see what this is about, really. And I want the experience of, hey, let me see how I can open myself. And I received that, and I put it into practice. And then my continued mushroom experience was just continuing into uncovering layers of myself. Uncovering just like an onion, just like, all right, peel this layer, and then this layer, and then this layer. And then somebody grabbed the onion that I was, flipped it into the air, and then ayahuasca just shot the onion into a million bits and pieces. And I was just like, oh God, I'm everything and everywhere all at once. Holy shit. And after ayahuasca, just everything changed. It was like, it was, I didn't have autism anymore. That wasn't even a thing in my mind. It was just like, I am Noah, and I'm not going to put labels on myself anymore. That's not what I'm here for. And I realized that when people would put autism as a label on me, they wouldn't see me as Noah. They would see me as, oh, Noah, the autistic guy. And And I felt like that hindered my connection with people because they would treat me differently than they would anybody else. And
oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I said, and I stopped labeling myself with that.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you're speaking to is something I feel very passionate about. And we're going to get into your ayahuasca journey because I am smitten to hear about that. But what I'll say first is that, I think that part of the duality / 3D dimension / human condition is this compartmentalizing, right? That's what the mind wants to do. It wants to figure out what box can I put myself in, what box can I put other people in. And it's not necessarily in a malicious way or anything. It's just that's simply how the mind works, right? At a certain level anyway. And I think that, the distinction that I think you were able to make at a certain point in your life, and then ayahuasca obviously was a much deeper level of this, was that, oh, that is what my mind is telling me to do, but I am not my mind. I am actually much more deeper than that. And so I can hear my mind try to compartmentalize people, and I can actually laugh at it and choose whether or not I want that compartmentalization to happen. And I think for most people, I won't say most people, but for many people, I will say they have not realized that yet. And, it's no judgment, right? It might not be everyone's mission to figure that out in this lifetime, simply discernment. What I find is that for me, I get along much better with people who are aware of that and who choose to only use that compartmentalization when it helps them actually have a greater and grander experience of life. So for instance, maybe someone goes, well, I'm allergic to shellfish, so therefore I'm going to compartmentalize that because if I eat any of those shellfish, I'm going to break out in hives. Cool. That's a good compartmentalization, right? That's a healthy one in my eyes anyway. But on the other hand, if I notice, for instance, that, someone is a liberal and someone is a Republican, and then my brain goes, oh, well, this person is going to act that way because they're left, or this person's going to act that way because they're right. And I'm not a political person, but that's just an easy example I can think about. That's when I go, no, that's not what we're going to do, because would I like that if it was done to me? Just because I'm a cannabis user, am I all of a sudden lazy? Am I a burnout? And where did even those stereotypes come from? They came from Reefer Madness. So where are these stereotypes about the left and right coming from, or anything in life, right? It's like, did I come up with those things on my own accordance, or is that someone else's depiction of life that I am then taking on and essentially externalizing my power onto them? And so I think this is like one of the challenges that we go through in life. And I think that, at least in this meat suit, I wasn't alive in the, times before the internet was around, or rather not the internet, but like, I would say I wasn't alive in the 18 or 17, 1600s or anything like that. So I would like to think that back then they had more time to contemplate on these things, but I don't know that inherently. What I do know about today is that it's really challenging, even if you're really aware, to have enough time to contemplate on these things. That's why, like, on my calendar every day, I have my meditation put in there, my breath work and everything, because I know the second I wake up, my mind's going to go, you don't need to do that today. Come on. You've done it for like the last 50 days in a row. What's skipping a day going to do? Just go make your cacao and do something else, right? But I go, no, because that's my time to remind myself who I really am. Because if I go into my day thinking on my mind, well, then my mind's going to take me on a wild goose chase into all this random shit. And so I think that, like, that's one of the challenges we go through that psychedelics can be a big help in, because many of us, I would argue to say most of us right now, don't have the resources or the availability to go meditate on top of a mountain for 20 years and come to these realizations, or even meditate on a mountain for a year. But a lot of us have the opportunity in an intentional, conscious way to find a guide, to find a facilitator, to find a shaman, a maestro, or whatever, and have these experiences if we choose and discern that those are right for us in our lives. And so what's really cool about, people like you and other people I've had on the show, and my own story too, is that for one reason or another, psychedelics attracted me. I did not look for them. They found me, and I refused them for a long time, specifically cannabis, right? I bought into the stereotypes. And then I remember the first time I tried it thinking, this is all this is. And I didn't just randomly, get 10 bags of Cheetos put on my lap and turn into a lazy stoner. So what else have I been lied to about? And that really allowed me to have a great awareness of questioning everything, even what I think I know. Because if I think I know something, that means that, just like you were saying, to the degree I think I know something is the degree to which I'm closed off to any outside influence coming in and telling me something different. And that can be great if, say, for instance, I am never going to do heroin in my life. I know that. I don't care who comes to me and tells me that heroin's the greatest thing. I don't think anyone ever has or will. But if someone came to me, I'd be like, nope, because I am closed off to that. But if you're not aware that that is an opportunity for you to realize, like, well, is this something that's inherently bad that destroys lives? Or is this something that's an opinion of someone? Like cannabis makes you lazy, right? Cannabis doesn't make you anything. You make you who you are. And so this kind of idea that we're talking about, or this high D, I'll say, is really cool and fascinating because, you know, I really feel it's discernment. It's being able to be self-aware. And, you know, so moving forward into your psychedelic experience, or your ayahuasca experience, rather, this is something I'm really curious to hear about because the little I know about your story with ayahuasca, a whole podcast got started from this experience, if I remember that correctly, the Mama's Boys podcast. Because when I first heard about your podcast, I was like, oh, cool. Like, I imagine there's like a meaning to this name. And I hadn't seen the logo yet. But of course, when I hopped on with you guys and you shared your story, I was like, this is a fucking cool idea. And so with that being said, I would love to dive into that story now because you set us up perfectly for it, saying that every experience you had at that point allowed you to be the onion, and then ayahuasca just shotgun blasted that onion into a million pieces. So please take it over, man. Tell us about that experience and how you got there and what made you sign up for it and everything.
I went through a massive identity crisis starting 3 years ago. I just went through a number of events where I didn't know if I was autistic or not. I wasn't working in the industry I wanted to work in. I was working in kitchens and in bakeries and, you know, working my ass off to try to survive. I wasn't in a place that I wanted to be. And I just became severely depressed, for like the worst depression I've ever had, where unfortunately it snowballed into suicidal thoughts. It just got to a point where I didn't know what I was, who I was, and I really felt like if I take a psychedelic right now, I'm not in a good mindset to do that. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I thought about going to therapy. My issue was I went to therapy for 17 years. I know what the process is. I know what they're going to ask. And knowing myself, I'll get tired of it and just tell them what they want to hear and just get it over with. And so in comes the little whisper. One day, I'm sitting in my room and I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to go and do it. I'm going to kill myself today. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but the first opportunity I do, I'm going to do it. And then this little thing happened where like a feeling came over me and it went, try ayahuasca. And that's how I knew I had received the calling. And I knew about ayahuasca for 4 years at that point because somebody told me about it. A friend of mine is a ayahuasquero who's a shaman. And I had heard about his amazing experience and other people's amazing experiences. And then I researched, excuse me, I had researched it and I'd seen all these amazing accounts and these amazing experiences that people got recovered from. And I thought to myself, all right, I have nothing to lose. I'm going to go and do it. And if this doesn't work, I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to do it. And I looked up where some reputable retreats could be, and I went over to the Amazon to do it. And I was surrounded by people, including Dom, Z, and Nick, who are the other hosts of the Mama's Boys podcast. And we all had different reasons to do it, but a lot of other people had severe depression, severe, I guess, despair in their lives. And it was just so out of my comfort zone and out of anything I ever knew in my life. Just being there in the Amazon with shamans, and this was the first time I'd ever like met a shaman. And it was like, oh, yeah, you're a completely different human being than I would have ever guessed existed. Holy fucking shit. Like, this is kind of freaking me out a little bit. And the first experience we had, the first ceremony, because we were going to do 4 ceremonies in 1 week. I only did 2 because I'll get into that later. But the first time, I was so fucking scared, dude. I was shitting myself. I was like, this is said to be the most powerful fucking psychedelic in the whole world. And the first feeling that came on wasn't a feeling, it was a voice in my head that went, hi, I'm here. We're going to talk. And I went, whoa, hold the fucking phone. What's happening? Because no visuals came through. No fractals came through. Nothing like that came through. And I was so caught off guard. And the voice went, you expected it to be this wild, crazy adventure in your head where fractals would come through and I would come in the form of a snake and I would swallow you up and you'd go through your whole life. Well, I'm here to tell you we're going to have a talk. And this is all your first experience is going to be. And it was just me and the medicine talking for hours. And the first thing she told me was, we're going to get this out of the way. I am not a psychedelic. I'm a medicine. And you're going to treat me as such. I freaked out. I was like, what? It was like things that were telling me that I would have never thought of on my own. It was just, this is how I knew, okay, this is way different than anything I would have ever even imagined. Holy fucking shit. And then she said, all right, and now. And I went, what do you mean? And I just started puking. And she went, all right, good. We got that out of the way. Now I'm going to tell you something. You're fat. I was so I was like, you're fat. I'm like, okay, you need to eat slower. I went, okay. She went, now I'm going to tell you what your identity is. And I went, okay, you're just you. I went, oh, come on now. What kind of answer is this? She's like, you're not understanding what I'm saying. You are you. I went, okay, but am I a writer, a cook, autistic, non-autistic? And she went, you need to think about this more. You need to understand the words that I'm saying and the feelings you're feeling right now. Just feel yourself and feel the words, you are you. And it clicked. It was an opening of like, oh, like treasure chest moment where I'm like, oh God, I get it. I'm just me. And she's like, yeah, you got it. You're just you. And I'm like, oh, okay. I can just live now. And she went, you got it, dude. Congratulations. And she got on about my family and the people who really loved me. And it was a really good introduction into it. And the next morning, I had just seen people who were severely depressed be just changed and elated and happy and laughing. I'd never seen that before. In a couple hours, just people are just cool. I'm like, whoa, this is out of this world. There's nothing like it I'd ever seen in my life. And then the second ceremony. And it was a little more what I would have expected from some of the other accounts. But it wasn't anything like I could have ever dreamed of. It's nothing like you would ever dream of in your life. At least for me, because it's different for everybody. And it became this thing where I was just gone. She had brought all of these entities that were doing surgery on me, that were testing my spirit, my mind, my body. I had a backache for months from being in the bakery, and it went away like that. It just got cured. Like just something happened where an entity came up to my back, went, and just, it was gone. It was the craziest thing in the world. And I I started having these entities reach their arms into my lungs and ripping the fear away from me. It was like almost like I don't know why I'm thinking of this metaphor allegory now, but it was almost like Egyptian surgery preparing to like push the mummy to the afterlife, where like my organs were coming out, but it wasn't my organs. It was my anger, my fear, my depression, my suicidal thoughts, and it was just all of these different energies just coming in, being like, okay, I see what we need to do with him. All right, so we're going to do this. And I freaked everybody out in the Maloka. Like, I freaked everybody out because the first time it happened, when the entity reached in and grabbed onto my fear, I went, just like complete, like this horrifying noise. I was like, and it was, and everyone was like, what the fuck? What the fuck? And then every trip started after that, and it was just like,
oh my God.
and then I would breathe out, I'd be like, oh, and then it'd go, oh, and it went like that for 45 minutes where I was just making that sound. And so everyone was like, all right, just ignore him. But I don't know how anybody did, because I was just out of control. Just out of control. And then she came up to me, she came to me and she said, all right, we got rid of the negativity. Now you need to let go of your love. I went, whoa, what are you talking about? She went, you need to let go of your family. So I trusted her and I said, all right, I leave my family behind. She said, now you need to let go of your friends. And I left my friends behind. She said, you need to let go of your girlfriend. And I let go of my girlfriend. And then she said, okay, you're ready. I went, for what? She went, you're going to die now. And I died. I just completely my spirit lifted. I was away, and I walked on this literal road of creation where I was walking and walking and walking, and I ended up in this infinite space filled with souls of people who had passed on, filled with entities, and filled just this infinite space of like, you're here, you're finally here. We're so happy that you're here. And we were dancing and we were literally with each other for all of eternity. And then she brought me back. She said, okay, I need to bring you back. She brought me back, and we had a conversation with each other. And in that moment, I realized there's nothing to fear in life at all. There's nothing, this is an experience that I'm going through, and I belong. And it doesn't matter what I do in life, and it doesn't matter who I am on a, I guess, simple basis, because I'm here just to experience things. And I'm not here for anybody else's purpose or amusement. I'm not here for the entertainment of being bullied by others. I'm not here to get treated nicer than anybody else. I'm not here to impress anybody or to feel like I'm still this little awkward autistic boy who's trying to belong. I'm not here to belong because I already belong. The mere fact that I was born in here means that I'm here for a reason that I belong. I'm not separate. I'm not truly separate, because the mushroom trip made me feel like I belong to the earth. This made me feel like I belong to everything. And when the onion was obliterated, it was because all of my ego died. All of me died. And when I truly surrendered and let go of everything, it was just a huge relief. And I could be reborn again and truly integrate what I had learned from ayahuasca. And my life has not been the same since. And it's been a year since it happened. And I'm still learning things. And I'm still looking. I mean, if it weren't for ayahuasca, I don't think I would have met you. And you're an incredibly amazing person who has this balls off the wall mission that I have so much respect and admiration for. And I'm eternally grateful for meeting people like you. I'm eternally grateful for being with the other mama's boys. It's eternally gratefulness for the rest of my life for being here. Even when I feel sadness, even when I feel anger, I can move through these things now. They're not things that chain me. They're things that liberate me. They're things that make me go, I am a human being. I am an experience. And Noah is just a name that I was given, but I am so much more. And this scared little boy is me. And I'm going to nurture and love the shit out of him because he didn't feel loved and nurtured by the world. And I would always recommend for anybody with autism to at least try psychedelics once, to just have that feeling of, oh shit, I do belong, because it's important. And I know what it feels like to just feel like you're just different and you're trying so hard to make connections and you're just not hitting the mark with people. And even when people are being nice to you, a lot of the times it's not genuine because they feel like they have to. They feel like, oh, be careful because you don't know what he's like. And I'm so tired of that. And now I'm truly free and I'm blessed and I feel blessed. And I think that anybody with autism should try it once because everyone should feel like they can connect and they can feel good about themselves and they can feel the fullest versions of themselves.
I love that, man. What an incredible story. I mean, there's so many things in there I'd love to dive into. You know, what's really funny is that, you know, I've had experiences. I've yet to try ayahuasca, actually, which is funny because here I am running a psychedelic podcast, and the only one I've yet to sit with is the one that's the most popular, right? But, or I would say probably not most popular. Mushrooms might have that right now, or MDMA with the Johns Hopkins research. But, you know, I recently got connected to my good friend and I feel like soul brother, this guy Hamilton Souther, who's an ayahuasca who runs Blue Morpho down in Peru, actually. Mm-hmm. And yesterday I was talking to Drew Banky, who's another ayahuasca, and him and Hamilton had just connected. And so like all these interesting things are happening, but you know, Drew was talking about when he died, before he died. And he was talking about how he was at Soul Quest down in Orlando because he couldn't afford to go to the jungle. And he was very suicidal too. He had been on, I think, 4 different deployments to Iraq and had seen some really fucked up shit. And just was like, hey, you know what? Like he had tried one time and gotten so close. He was like shocked when he woke up in the hospital. And the first thought he had was like, all right, next time you're not fucking around. Right. Like that was the first thought that came to him. So you can imagine like the headspace he was in. Right. And he said that I think it was the second night. It seems like the second night is the real doozy for a lot of people. Sometimes the first night, I know Aubrey was talking about in his first experience, the first night was kind of the doozy, but you know, he was talking about that his ego held on until the very end. So basically what happened was he was going through this experience of being in the yard and everyone, you know, was obviously, you know, in the full medicine space by that point. And he sees this light coming towards him and his ego's like, oh my God, someone lost their mind. They got in their car and now they're going to try to run us all over. And so then, you know, he was like, well, I can't move. So then he's like, but then it seemed like it was one light. So then he goes, oh my God, like his ego was literally still trying to cling on. It's like, oh my God, you somehow ended up on train tracks and there's a train coming at you and you're going to die. You got to get up. And he goes, finally, I just surrendered and was like, well, I guess the thing's going to kill me. And then it overtook him and he died before he died. Very similar to the experience I had on 5-MeO DMT, where, you know, of course you have no fucking idea how to explain that after you've gone through it. And I'll try my best, but basically, I don't even know where to start, but that's exactly what happened. You know, I knew the degree of the medicine I was working with at that point. I was with a professional and, you know, I had planned this for quite a while. It wasn't something I did, you know, off the cuff, but, you know, again, like how, you know, like with mushrooms, with LSD, even with ayahuasca, like you're drinking or eating something and you're waiting a certain amount of time and then it comes on, right? So it's coming on slowly, and then it will gradually get stronger and stronger. Well, with 5-MeO, I mean, I don't know if you've experimented with 5-MeO or Bufo, but have you tried it before?
No, and it's something that I want to try eventually, but I will be honest, it scares the ever-living shit out of me.
I don't blame you at all, man. Like, I enjoy the psychedelic space a lot. And by enjoy, I do not mean that every experience I have is positive. A lot of them have been challenging as shit. But when you're going through it and you're feeling yourself just get purified, it's fucking awesome, you know? And so, like, for me, I'm someone who I've enjoyed my psychedelic experiences, even the challenging ones. Well, with this medicine, you're inhaling it, and within 3 seconds, you're gone. Like, there's no you left. Like, so imagine being completely sober like we are right now. In 3 seconds, you're just a blob. Like, you're not even a human. You don't remember you have a name. You don't remember you're human. You don't remember anything except white light. That's all there is. And you're feeling every micro emotion of the universe at once. So imagine if you could feel 100 emotions every second, and then like what that does to your like experience, where like your ego is just like clinging on, like, and scraping its fingernails, and then that's gone. And then like you're feeling all these emotions, that's then gone. Then you're like, what's above that? Then the thought of being what's above that is gone. And then there's just nothing, and there's just void. And it's just like, it was the most beautiful thing ever, but very terrifying. And it was just pure white light. I mean, the people that were there with me said I had my eyes wide open, and I don't remember, I literally don't remember any of it. You know, I mean, I remember like the experience, but you know, at a certain point, you know, it is more of an experience rather than an actual thought or like something you can remember. And so it reminds me of what Drew was talking about and what you were talking about of this experience, where what he was saying is that, you know, source right now, right? If we're all here as emanations of source, and source is trying to understand itself through infinite different realities. And so we're all different flavors of ice cream, essentially, that allow source to know what ice cream is. Because in order to know what ice cream is, it's got to try all the ice cream in the world, and it's got to try different combinations of it. You know, what if it's 75% vanilla, 25% chocolate? What if it's 50% vanilla, 50% chocolate? What if it's 60-40, right? So there's an infinite amount of combinations. What Drew said is that, you know, source is really interested now in not just experiencing different flavors of, say, ice cream, but it's also interested in remembering that it is ice cream and then trying ice cream. So the analogy being that like source now wants people to understand they are God and then still be an individual emanation of God, right? Or source, or whatever you want to call it. Right. So he says that like when you have that experience of remembering that you are God, and then you come back to this reality, there's a whole different, you know, ball game. And, you know, that is definitely a close description of what I felt on 5-MeO, especially the second time I did it. First time was kind of like, you know, like, oh, what is this? And then like Control Alt Delete. And then the second time I knew a little bit more of what I might experience. And so I was able to go a little bit deeper. But I mean, man, these experiences are so powerful. And I'm curious, you know, you said before that you only did 2 out of the 4. What was like the deciding factor that made you go, I'm good after 2? Was it just that you got what you were looking for? Or was there something else going on too? I'm curious to hear that.
So when I was coming back from the realm after dying, because she slowly brought me back, and which crazy thing, actually, I had opened my eyes when I came back and I could see spirits. Like open-eyed hallucinations of like these spirit walkers who were going to person, and they would look into the person and then they would point to the facilitators, and the facilitators would actually go to where that person was, where the spirit walker was. It was crazy.
Wow.
It was just, and I knew that they weren't people. Like, that's the thing. I knew they weren't, because I was back. I was like, and then I would see spirits outside of the Maloka looking in, like, what's happening here? And it was just like, oh, this is what like an actual open-eyed spiritual hallucination is. This is what it is. Okay, it's not just like wavy lines or like colors intensified. It's, oh, these are people. Okay. And they would help. And then one of them like came up and looked at me, and then he went to the next person, and then tapped on, inspected them, and then called out to a facilitator, and the facilitator would come and help that person. It was like they were the ones seeing the state of people and then coming back to spread the message to the shamans and facilitators. It's crazy. It was wild. But what it was Mother Aya telling me, you're done. Don't take me again. And don't take Bufo, because I was going to take Bufo during that time. I was going to take the 5-MeO. I was going to go for that jump, but she said, listen, there is such a thing as too much medicine. You got what you needed. And my grandmother came to visit me, the one who died of MS. She came to visit me because one of my intentions was I want to say goodbye to her because I never said goodbye. And she came to me and she said, you never needed to say goodbye. I've always been here and will always be here. And I was so grateful for that experience because it really made me feel better. It was my grandmother, she was truly my first love and light in life. She couldn't move, she couldn't talk very well, but she always smiled through her pain. And it was the first instance I ever had of somebody where, despite their circumstances, they smiled and dealt with it with grace. And she just came to visit me and she was flying. And the reason why that's important is because she loved birds and she always wished that she could fly. And so she had bird feeders outside her window and she loved it when birds visited her. And there's a whole story about when she died, a small bird flew into the house, flew straight to her bedroom, flew to the pictures and everything. And there's lots of longer details about it. And anyway, she came and she said, I need you to bring somebody to me. I went, oh, okay, who? She said, I want you to bring your father. I need to see him. I went, okay, I'll spread the message. And I said, is there anything else? She said, nope. Just know that I'm always here. You never need to say goodbye because I'll always be with you. And she flew away. And, ayahuasca had told me something where I would never take her again for the rest of my life. But, however, recently I've come with the calling again. And I went to see a shaman about it very recently, the shaman that was here in France. And she looked over me and she said, and this is something that ayahuasca had also said, you're a powerful healer and you need to learn how to use some things that you're able to do. And the reason why you're being called to do ayahuasca again is because the old world is gone and the new world is here. And the new world is opening up and people need help navigating in this new world. And the reason why you're being called to do it is because you have more things to learn and you need to go deeper. And so it's something that I completely believe. And she said, it was actually funny because she had the exact same experience I did it twice, was told never to do it again, had the same calling as I did on that day. We had the exact same calling at the exact same time to do it again. And she did it 12 years ago. So it was something crazy. And she said, now we're being called to go forth and do it again because the old world is gone. And she just told you not to do it in the old world again. Now you need to go back. And to be honest, even though it was the best experience I've ever had in my life, also the most overwhelming one, I am still shitting myself.
No medicine needed either, because we know that sometimes you do shit yourself with ayahuasca. So.
Yeah. This time, it just might happen. And I will accept it and be completely happy in my own poo. So it'll be
more the merrier,
Absolutely.
Well, Noah, man, this has been amazing, dude. What an incredible story. I loved hearing about your grandmother too. I've had some really interesting experiences with my father after he's passed in very similar states with specifically mushrooms on deep, deep mushroom journeys. And I know that's one of my intentions going into ayahuasca is to have closure with him because when he passed, he had brain cancer and the version of him, he was I could tell he was very frustrated. There was things he was saying that, he would just say this fuzziness in my head. I don't really feel like me. And, these kind of things that, of course, when I'm hearing it, it's breaking my heart. But, like having had him pass on, I was so grateful because I knew that like his time had come, and yet at the same time, when he passed, it was very, it wasn't sudden by any means. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. I mean, I knew it was coming, but it was very like numbing, he was at the house. It was like 1 a.m. I was actually working on my plants, and my mom told me, "Hey, your dad just died." And so it was super interesting going through that. And I knew that I never really got the closure that I wanted, yet I know he's with me all the time, but I would love to hear his voice again. And so I know that's one of my intentions going into it too. And so I loved hearing that part of your story, man. And, I want to give you an ample opportunity to tell the listeners where they can find you, where they can discover the Mama's Boys podcast, because that was born out of your experience with ayahuasca with your friends down there, or people that became your friends rather. Yeah. And so, man, where can they find you? Where can they find the podcast? And where can they stay updated on everything that you're doing in the world?
So you can find us on Instagram at Mama's Boys Podcast. You can also find us on our website, podpage.com/mamasboys. And that's pretty much it so far. We also have a Patreon opened up if anybody wants to support us there. Buy me a coffee. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Deezer. Lots of platforms that we utilize. And, we're a fairly new podcast, so we're still improving things. We're still learning things. And we would love if anybody can come give us a listen. We talk all kinds of things, psychedelics, spirituality, the human experience in general, but mainly psychedelics, because that's the thing that drove us all together. And that's pretty much it. You can also find me on my Instagram profile, Noberville, where I have a photography series called Faces of Nature, where I take photos and mirror them and create faces. And just any of my photography, you guys can check out there.
That's amazing, man. And my last question for you, Noah, is this. Let's say someone listens to this conversation and are extremely excited to look into psychedelics in their own life. What is the one piece of advice that Noah Vilgrain would suggest to them to allow them to use the proper discernment in choosing whether or not psychedelics are right for them in their life?
Have an intention. If you feel like it's right for you, make sure that you have an intention, whether it's to figure yourself out, to deal with some shit, or if you want your mind to be a bit more open. Having an intention helps you go through the tougher parts of a journey. It allows you to remind yourself, I'm here for a reason. Let's not get too lost. Let's try to go through it and flow and see where this takes me. But I do want to stick to my intention. And I guess it's one of those things where you kind of have to feel like you're ready for it. If you don't feel like, I'm not quite there, don't do it. Everything has its divine timing. So if you feel the time is right, set an intention, have a good set and setting, and you'll be just fine.
I love that. Very sound advice. Okay, guys. When I first met Noah while being a guest on his podcast, the Mama's Boys podcast, I clicked with him and his team immediately. It is a funny thing that I experience when I meet other individuals whose lives have been transformed as a result of conscious interactions with psychedelics, whereby I feel as though we already know each other on a deep level, even though we just met. I imagine this is due to the degree of openness and vulnerability that can be felt between individuals who have experienced the oneness that can be felt not only in the psychedelic space, but in any spiritual practice. For those of you who are looking to connect with Noah, find the Mama's Boys podcast and benefit from the beautiful energy he emits to those he connects with. Make sure to check out the show notes for this episode, where you can find all of the easiest ways to do this today. My hope is that by hearing stories such as Noah's, we can all continue to be humbled by not only the power of psychedelics, but by the power and determination of the human soul to individuate, become sovereign, and live life on the terms that feel in alignment to each of our souls. Noah, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story with the listeners and me today, for being vulnerable and speaking to the challenges you've gone through that are able to inspire each listener who tuned into this episode today, and for being someone who is leading his life heart forward. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.